Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Just Listen to Yourself podcast with Kira Davis. I, of course, am your host, Kira Davis. And this is a podcast where we take hot button issues, hot topics, and we explore the talking points on those issues and we draw them out to their logical conclusion. Because I believe that we don't really spend enough time examining what we're saying, examining the things we believe. Sometimes when we actually take the time to look at those things, it can turn out we're not actually saying what we think we're saying. So I do a lot of subjects on this show. Last week we had some great topics. We did Should Women Propose to Men? That was a really hot episode. If you haven't heard it, go back and take a listen. Let me know what you think. And then we did gentrification, and I had my very first guest on, Giovanni Brusto. We talked about in response to a listener letter, we talked about what gentrification is, what it means for a community, how it happens, and what our responsibilities are as citizens in regards to gentrification. It was fascinating. I actually learned a lot. I learned some stuff I didn't know. And I think that I actually taught Giovanni a couple of things he didn't know. So that's what can happen when you just have a civil back and forth. When you're willing to be curious, sometimes you can find out things that you didn't know. So I like that my listeners are curious, and I hope that you'll continue to be so. And if you know of other people who are curious-minded like you, maybe they're not conservatives like me, maybe they're not even liberals, maybe they don't care about politics at all, but they have a healthy sense of curiosity, share this podcast with them. And then, if you don't mind, give me some ratings and reviews. Good ones, please. If it's a bad one, just keep it to yourself. Just talk about me behind my back. I always say, if you have something bad to say about me, don't say it to my face. Say it behind my back like a normal person. That's what I prefer. But I appreciate your ratings and reviews. It really helps the show, helps it in the search rankings and all of that. And thank you to everyone who has done that so far. Today, I want to take a little bit of a detour and talk about an issue that's really personal to me. And that's California's new law that went into effect January 1st, 2020. It is officially titled AB 5, but it is known across the country as the gig economy law. You may not have heard of it, but if you haven't, then you definitely want to listen to this show because it's got some national implications to it as well that could affect you no matter where you live. So AB 5 is a bill that purports to fight companies like Uber and Lyft and force them to make their contractors employees. There's a lot of different reasons for that, and we'll get into that. And I'll explain why, if I like those reasons or not. But that's the bill. The problem with the bill, though, is that it was written so vaguely and so confusingly that it, quote, accidentally ended up applying to everyone who contracts for everything, almost. So there's a lot of people that got caught in the crossfire that really had no idea this was coming. And even people who supported this bill as a pro-union bill, as a bill that would help solidify a better income for contractors by making them employees. Even people who support the bill are getting caught in it. A great example of this is the writers at Vox Media, VOX. You may have heard them. They've got a blog. I think they do some stuff for TV. And they were very excited for AB 5. They felt that it would help the writers unionize. It would help the writers be, quote, safer in their employees. And so they really supported it, wrote a lot about it, protested for it. And when it went into law, Vox ended up having to lay off hundreds of their writers because they couldn't meet the standards in the bill. So a lot of people are getting trapped by it. Now, I'm going to read you a little bit of the text. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. It's convoluted and complicated, as most legislation is. But just to give you an idea, I'll just read you a couple of portions from the bill. And if you want to look at it yourself, it's easy enough to find. A simple Google search will bring you to lots of different places where you can view the whole text, or you can view just different people's opinions on the text. If that's easier for you, simply type in AB5 California into your search engine and a bunch of stuff will come up. If you want something easier than to sit and read a bunch of jargon for 15 minutes, head over to my Twitter feed. It's realkiradavis, Kira, realkiradavis, and I've got an article pinned to the top of my timeline, and it's a video of this guy, this libertarian guy here in California, did a little explainer video on AB5, who it affects and why it's dangerous. And I think it's the best and simplest explanation I've seen so far on what this bill is. So that if that's easier for you, go check that out. Here's one section from AB5. By expanding the definition of an employee for purposes of these provisions, the bill would expand the definition of a crime, thereby imposing a state-mandated local program. So right off the top, we see that employers can be classified as criminals. It actually makes criminals out of some employers, small businesses, and entities who can't comply with this law properly. Again, one of the problems is the compliance issues are very vague. Here's one of the reasons why it got so weird and it ends up affecting freelancers like me. In section 2, it explains a little further what is going on. For the purposes of the provisions of this code and the Unemployment Insurance Code, and for the wage orders of the Industrial Welfare Commission, a person providing labor or services for remuneration shall be considered an employee rather than an independent contractor unless the hiring entity demonstrates that all of the following conditions are satisfied. A, the person is free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in connection with the performance of the work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in fact. B, the person performs a work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. C, the person is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature that is involved in the work performed. Did you understand all that? Nobody does. Nobody does. First of all, what this bill does is it makes it puts the burden of proof on the employer. So the employer has to prove that you as a contractor, I'll just use freelance writers as an example, but this applies to nail technicians, hairdressers, musicians, actors, lots of people, truck drivers. Truck drivers just went to court and got an exemption. So I guess they figured, well, if we got the exemption, we don't care about anybody else. I don't know what other exemptions might be coming down, but some people have had to go to court to prove that this bill doesn't apply to them. It's that messy. But what it means is that if the work you do constitutes the majority of the work of the employer, constitutes that same kind of industry product, then you cannot contract for that person. So again, I'll use freelancing as the example. I'm a freelance writer. I'm contracted. I basically sell my product to blogs, magazines, online publications. If I want to write for Forbes magazine, I will submit an article. They'll tell me if they like it, and then they'll send the check. If they like it, they'll publish it, and then they'll send the check. Under this bill, that can no longer happen because Forbes magazine is a publisher. The work they do is writing. So if they want to produce stories, they have to hire writers as employees rather than just contract their work, because the bulk of what they produce is writing. Now, if Forbes magazine was not a magazine, but it was a trucking company, and they just wanted a post, they wanted someone to write something for their website about how trucking is great, then that wouldn't count as part of this AB5 mess. I could do that, but not if they are a company that is a publishing company. Does that make sense to you? You can see I'm already having so much trouble explaining this. This is how convoluted it is. The problem is no one is really quite sure all of what exactly that means and who it entails and who it will entangle. On top of that, the bill also limits me as a writer. So it's not just monitoring the employer, it's monitoring me. So say I did write a piece for Forbes, the trucking company, for their website. And they're not a publisher, but they just want this one article. The problem is I'm only allowed to write 35 articles a year until I'm considered an employee of someone or something. I will be penalized if I write more than 35 articles a year, no matter what they are or who they're for, unless I can incorporate and be my own business. So that now, instead of being a sole proprietor, a freelance contractor, I have to make myself an employee of myself. You might be saying to yourself, well, okay, it's inconvenient, but that's not that big of a deal, Kira. But what I have to do is I have to establish an LLC. And here in California, an LLC is $800 a year. And it doesn't matter if you make a dime. Make a dime, you make $1 million. It's $800 per year to incorporate and then renew that LLC every single year. On top of that, I have to pay the legal fees that go along with that. On top of that, because I am now an employee of myself, I have to pay payroll taxes on myself. I have to pay unemployment insurance on myself. Plus, I have to pay my own income taxes. So it's double taxation, triple if you count the fee, the $800 fee. So it's really forcing me into a corner that I didn't particularly want to be in. And in fact, I became a freelance writer because I didn't want to be anyone's employee. And that brings me to the larger question. Does the government have the right to decide how you work? If it's legal, as long as you're not a drug dealer or something that goes against the law like that, does the government have the right to decide how you work? I know that there are a lot of people out there who say, well, workers need to be protected. That's why we have unions. That's how unions developed in the first place. Employers were taking advantage of their employees, taking advantage of the desperation of workers. And so workers began to unionize and exert their strength as employees to try to level the playing field and to protect themselves. So one time in this country, unions were very necessary and they were very helpful to the American worker. And then as we moved along, we ended up codifying some of these protections into law. So we have a lot of labor laws. You know that, right? Wherever you are, you've got labor laws, you've got minimum wage laws, you've got laws that dictate how many hours you can work before you get a break, how long the break is. We have laws that dictate when a person can start working. Like we don't do child labor here in America. Here in California, I think you have to be 16 before you can start working. There are some exemptions, of course, for the entertainment industry. So we all are familiar with the labor laws around us. Protection from abuse is good. But when does that protection become an impediment to your freedom as an individual? Well, I posit that it's now. Now it is becoming a problem. It is getting in the way of your freedom to earn. And union rules and unions in the first place were developed so that they could help you work, so that they could help you earn on your terms instead of the employer's terms. Now with bills like AB 5, we're forced to be employed on the government's terms. So the employee is no longer an effective negotiator in this relationship. An employee is no longer allowed to negotiate. All of this is decided by the state and by the employer. And the employee, or in this case, the contractor, has been taken out of the equation. All right, let's get beyond the jargon. Let's get to the nitty-gritty of this. Why is this bad? AB 5 was originally drafted to get at Uber and Lyft because, well, for a lot of reasons. One reason is that the taxi cab unions here don't like Uber and Lyft, and that goes for everywhere because it really undercuts their business. And taxi cab drivers have to pay a lot of money for those licenses. I think they call them medallions, especially in New York City. In New York City, a taxi cab license can cost $1 million. $1 million. Your cab driver, your yellow cab driver in New York City, The reason why he's so angry all the time is because he's had to pay $1 million for the privilege of driving you around. Understandably, they don't think it's fair that someone can download an app, get in a car, and go pick up customers and drive wherever without the state putting their hands in it. So they kicked up a fuss. They said it's not fair that these people get to do this and we've got to follow the law. A lot of those cab drivers might prefer to move over to a situation like Uber or Lyft, but they're already invested $1 million. So I get it. I get why people were upset by that. So they went to the government and they said, we've got to do something about this. And the government said, all right, we need to figure out a way to outlaw this relationship. And so in the name of, quote, protecting workers, this bill was drafted to really try to hobble Uber and Lyft, or basically turn them into regular cab companies, by forcing them to make their drivers employees instead of contractors. Right now, Uber can say, we just have a contract relationship. We give the drivers access to our app, to our connectivity to customers, and to some of the other technology that you need to do this. And then if the driver agrees, they get in their car, they download the app, and they do a profit sharing with us. They share part of the profits of that ride with us, and then they get their earnings from their individual rides. Because they're not employees, they can decide when they want to work. So you don't have to be scheduled 8 hours a day, 9 to 5, or, you have to get this break here. You can hop in the car and go drive after work, or hop in the car and drive on the weekends. You decide your hours for yourself. Well, some people thought that was an injustice, and people needed to be guided in their employment status. So this bill came with the idea that Uber and Lyft would have to make all of these people employees. What happens when you make a person an employee? Well, suddenly, as an entity, you have to start paying payroll taxes, other employee taxes. You have to start offering benefits. You have to start instituting labor laws, like how long a person can work, what hours a person can work, how many breaks they have to take, which is absolutely antithetical to the whole idea of Uber and Lyft and why anyone drives those things, right? You choose Uber because you get to choose the hours. And the cost of that is you not being able to be an employee. But that's what people like about it. That's why we call it the gig economy, because this is your side gig. A lot of people have regular jobs in the LA area, and here in Southern California, a lot of people are artists. And so they might not have regular jobs. They do this for a steady income, and they can do it on their own time. And then they can go make their auditions. They can go to their music gigs. That's one of the biggest problems with being an actor in LA. Any restaurant will tell you that. If you apply for a restaurant job in LA, one of the first things that you will see on the form is, we do not reschedule you for auditions. So everyone going in is responsible. If you work at a restaurant, you're responsible for making sure that your auditions don't get in the way of your work. They don't make exceptions. You got to find someone to fill in for you or whatever, but they're really strict about that because, gosh, I bet 75% of the restaurant industry is our artists. And that, again, that's very understandable. So what a lot of people do, they don't want to be stuck with that in case they get a really great audition. So they choose to do things like Uber and Lyft to ease their burden. What ended up happening, though, is that Uber and Lyft are so big and they have so much money that we're like, well, we're going to take this to court. And in the meantime, we're just going to ignore it. We're just going to keep letting our drivers drive, and, good luck, come get us. But the rest of us who don't have any resources like that got caught up in the entanglement. Does the government have the right to tell you if you are allowed to be an employee or a contractor? The answer has got to be no. I understand that this is supposedly set up as a protection for workers, but listen to what you're saying. If this is what you believe, this is what you're saying. And I believe that this applies to anything where choice is involved. You can go back to my school choice issue and you can hear me talk about this a lot. What you're saying is that some people are too stupid to know what's good for them. Because you might actually be sitting there listening to this podcast and saying, well, Kira, I don't think it is fair. I think Uber treats their drivers like crap. The profit sharing isn't enough. It's barely a minimum wage job when you work out everything at the end of the day, gas and car expenses, all that. It's barely a minimum wage job. People don't get benefits like health care or retirement benefits. And Uber's kind of a greedy organization, and they're shorting their drivers. That may well be true. I actually drove for Uber briefly. I wanted to see if it could work for me. I didn't like it, so I quit. But that's the point. That is the point. It was my decision. So when you're saying that this is a protection for people and this gives people a safety net, you're saying that people aren't too stupid to decide for themselves if they want all that. It's a transaction, and the government should not get in the way of your legitimate, self-sustaining transactions. If a person doesn't like the deal that Uber is giving them, wants benefits, wants healthcare, wants insurance, and wants to know that they have a place to go 8 hours a day with guaranteed breaks, then that's the job they should go find. You don't force the entity to bend to the will of the state. You let the participants in the transaction decide what is good for them. So Uber says, this is what I'm offering you. And the driver says, well, okay, I'll take it, because the flip side is that I get to work my own hours. I get to decide when and where I drive. And I get to be kind of the master of my own domain. Or the driver says, I don't like it. I want benefits. And they go and find a real job, a day job that has all that to offer. The idea that we need the government to protect us from our own poor decisions is frankly offensive. And it's the same way with school choice. I feel the same way. What you're saying is that people are too dumb to know what's good for them. And I know we like to joke about how dumb Americans are, or how dumb those people that don't think like you are. But at the end of the day, that's not true. All of these people are you. They're just like you. They have the same decision-making skills. And just because you live in poverty, or just because you're low income, doesn't mean that you don't have any good sense. Listen to how offensive that is. This is not a bill. This is not a concept to protect workers. Do you know what protects workers? Freedom of choice. Because when you are able to choose the terms on which you are employed or in which you engage in a transaction, you have the freedom to walk away from that at any moment, the same way you have a freedom to engage in it. The government has no place in this relationship outside of the taxes that they take, which are already exorbitant nationwide, let alone in the state of California. Absolutely not. This is no kind of protection. This is saying that people are too dumb to make choices for themselves. We don't need the government to legislate our choices for us. People can just leave or not leave. I like being a freelance writer. I don't want to be anyone's employee. I would love to have my own insurance. I would love to have insurance benefits and retirement benefits and a company Christmas party and a Christmas bonus every holiday season. I would love that. But in order to have that, I've got to chain myself to someone else for 8 hours a day. I have to have a boss. I have to have an office building, and I have to have a scheduled 8-hour workday. Well, that doesn't work for me as a writer. I became a writer because I wanted to stay home and raise my children. But for me, just for me, that wasn't enough. I did want to have some kind of career. I wanted to work, and I couldn't work in the career that I had originally planned and raise my kids. So I've always loved writing and I've always had an interest in culture and politics. So I set about figuring out how to get paid to write. And it was a years-long process, writing for free, going to conferences, networking, making connections. But eventually I did it. And even though I didn't have the benefits of a regular job, the trade-off was invaluable because it allowed me to stay home with my kids and still have the financial flexibility to help with household expenses. It was a godsend. And that is for a lot of people. In fact, in writing, a lot of the industry is made up of women, a huge amount. I might venture to say over 50% at this point. That is because a lot of women are staying home with their families and they're using this ability that the internet has given them to earn money while they can be at home with their families. Another area that this is going to have a huge and horrific effect on is the minority community. And we know anecdotally, right? A lot of us know people that do hair out of their home, do nails out of their home. I know a lot of women in the inner city. That's how they earn their extra money. They braid hair. They do nails. They do, makeup or hair treatments. They do it out of their apartments. And somebody gives them $40 and they do it. This is going to affect them. These are legislations and laws that will outlaw one of the main sources of income for low-income communities. Now they're going to have to get dumped into the system. They're going to have to find a place to work for. They're going to have all those extra taxes deducted from their paychecks, and they're not going to have the flexibility they need to parent their kids properly. And you're talking about a lot of people who are single parents. And so the side gigs, which for a lot of them might be their main gig, help keep them flexible and able to do their jobs as parents. It's going to hit those people hard. The government has no business in the services you provide for another person that are within the law. And what I mean by that is, like, you're not a prostitute, you're not a drug dealer, you're just a regular citizen. We have choice in this country. We have freedom, and we also have a lot of protections. That's the other thing. It's not like we're India. It's not like we're China. We have a constitution, so we already have a lot of built-in protections. We don't need extra laws. The Constitution protects us from a lot of abuse. So we have the Constitution to lean back on. We don't need individual state government entities sticking their fingers in the pie even more. What we need is the freedom to choose how we want to work. It's our right. It's your right. You know that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions? Yeah, this is exactly an example of that. My personal view is that actually the government doesn't have good intentions. I think that the state of California knew what they were doing. And this is all just a scheme to pull in more payroll taxes and to hobble the freelance market. Because the problem with the freelance market is the government doesn't get a big enough piece of it in their minds. And in California, I don't know if you ever see articles that say California has a surplus, but that's a lie. That's magic. It has a surplus if you don't look at what we're spending. In reality, we're $1 trillion in debt over our pension system. We have a huge pension system. There are some people in this state who work for the government, retire from the government at 55, get another regular job, and then pull in their pensions at 95% of what their yearly salary was. Not only that, but the way the law is set up here, the way labor law is set up here in California, you get 95% of the last year that you worked. So what happens is a lot of people will pull in overtime, like cops, firefighters, government workers, DMV employees. They'll log a ton of overtime, which in some cases will double or triple their yearly salaries. And then that's the amount they get paid on, 95% of. We're paying some people $400,000 a year in pensions. I mean, you multiply that by tens of thousands, right? The problem starts to become clear. We are constantly passing new taxes here in the state of California that purport to solve homelessness, crime, education crisis, you name it. And it's always for something like build new schools, build some water reservoirs. But if you look in the fine print, it'll always have some little like asterisk, and it'll say, this bill also allows for the state to pull the taxes from this fee or from this bill and apply them to the general fund if the leaders say it's needed. The general fund is basically, it's a change jar, right? Everything, it's the rainy day fund. Things go in there. And when the government has something that they haven't specifically allocated for, they reach into the general fund and they grab some money out of it. Well, the general fund is how the pensions are getting funded now. So everything gets dumped in there. So you think you've passed a new tax to support your school, but all you've done is pass a new tax that will go into the general fund to try to satisfy this $1 trillion deficit, pension deficit that we have. So I don't believe that the state of California has good intentions, but maybe you do. And I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. Maybe you do believe that this was well intended, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And what the hell difference does it make if it's a good intention if it kills the very people it's meant to save? This is the government telling you that you don't know how to conduct your own affairs and that you don't understand that working for yourself is actually harmful to yourself. You don't know that, so they have to save you from yourself. You should always be allowed to make the choice. I get it. And I get it. Totally get it. If you feel like, Kira, it's not fair for employees to take advantage of the desperation of people who want to work, and they're getting away with so much by not making these people employees, by not creating regular jobs, and it's not fair. Again, you could be absolutely right. Maybe Uber is greedy. In fact, I think they are. I drove for them, and I know that it's really hard to make a decent living driving Uber. It can only be a side gig. You're not going to support yourself on Uber driving. I believe a lot of that is the profits that Uber takes. And there's some other interesting things that people don't know about Uber, just not to get sidetracked. I'll try to remember to get back, but Uber never really came about. They never really wanted to be a taxi company, a rideshare company. Uber actually has a 10 or 20 year plan. They want to get into the driverless car business. That's what they want to do. So this is just like step one on the way there. Just like Netflix, step one for them was renting out DVDs. Remember when you used to get those sent to your house? But they always knew that they wanted to go into streaming. They always knew that, but they had to start somewhere. So they started there and then they crept up to streaming, and now they're in the movie business. That was a plan. Same with Uber. Uber is not really a rideshare company. They lose a lot of money on rideshares right now. They don't care because they're focusing on 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future when driverless cars become a thing, and we're almost there when they become common, and then they can get rid of the driver and make the driverless cars the rideshare, basically turning themselves into a cab company. So that's an interesting sidebar for Uber. But you might be saying to yourself, just to circle back here, Kira, it isn't fair that companies like Uber take advantage of people, take advantage of the desperation. They don't share their profits properly. It's not fair. Let me concede your point. It's not fair. Here's the thing. You don't have to work for them. Then don't work for them. If a company mistreats you, if a company mistreats their employees, then you as a human being get to say, as an American citizen, get to say, I don't like this. I'm not working for you. I'm not giving you my labor. I'm out of here. I'm going to go find a job with a place that appreciates me. And that's why businesses offer benefits like IRAs and healthcare, dental care, and all that. Those are incentives, right? For good employees. Those are incentives. So you go to a company where there's good incentives and you find a job there. And there's all kinds of jobs that are like that don't require masters and college degrees. I mean, they're everywhere. They're not probably glamorous jobs, but neither is driving for Uber, even if you are an employee. The government doesn't need to protect you from yourself. The government doesn't need to protect you from making your own decisions. Now, you might say, well, Kira, there are people out there who just don't know. They don't know what their rights are. They don't know that they can go somewhere else, or they don't think they have the education to go somewhere else, or this is their last option. To which I say, again, You're infantilizing people who aren't like you. You're infantilizing people you don't know. Everyone can make their own decisions and everyone can educate themselves about their rights. And if you're really concerned that people don't know their rights, then maybe instead of snatching those rights and their income along with it, you should go educate people. You should let people know, hey, you don't have to work for Uber. There's plenty of jobs. You don't have to put up with this. But the government coming in, stepping in and saying, oh, we're going to take away your choice in how you want to deal with this company. No, unacceptable. I actually feel the same about American child labor laws. Hear me out. Don't press stop. Hear me out. And California is a great example of the hypocrisy of our child labor laws. We all know that we have child labor laws because in some countries, children are forced to work, not necessarily by the government, but by their economic situations. Children are forced to work in horrible conditions, mines, factories, and there's no laws against that. And morally wise, that is reprehensible, and it has more to do with the economy of a country than how businesses conduct themselves. Businesses will just do whatever they can get away with. But because people need money so desperately, they will put their children in these positions. And what happens what happens in a country like some parts of India where people make $1 a day and the government comes in and you have kids to help you with this. And then the government comes in and says, your kids can't work. Morally, that's the right thing to do. But again, you always have to draw things out to their logical conclusion. Morally, that's the right thing to do. It might take 30, 40 years for the rest of the country to catch up, the economy to change, and the morality of companies to do business. And that in that time, those families have lost a huge portion of their income. Mom and dad with 2 kids that are working have lost a huge portion of their income. So I'm not saying it's right, but you have to look at the flip side of what happens to people. There are real consequences that affect the day-to-day lives of people, what they can put on their table, what they can clothe their kids with. It's not just as simple as, you know what, it's really bad putting kids to work. It is bad putting kids to work. But when you just go in and say, hey, I'm doing this for your own good, and there's nothing to replace it, there's no help to replace it, you're hobbling people. You're getting in the way of their choices. But this is not India. This is not China. This is America. So we don't worry about our kids going to work in mines or sweatshops. We don't have to worry about that. Our kids are protected by a constitution. And we have all kinds of help, programs, charities for low-income people who otherwise might be making their kids work, but because of the laws of this country are unable to do that. And so don't have the extra income that I guess they would in some other country. We have all kinds of people, all kinds of programs to help people like that. What about people like me and my son, who is now 17? He's working at his first job that he's had for a little over a year now. He started when he was 16. He works at Subway. He's a sandwich artist. He's not a sandwich maker. He's a sandwich artist. That's what they say at Subway. And, he hates the job. He hates it. And food service is the worst. But he gets to make his own money. He doesn't have to beg mom and dad for 10, 20 bucks here and there to go to the movies or for gas for his car. So it's the choice he makes. He wanted to start working at 14. And we found a position for him. We found a place where he actually could do a job and do it responsibly and do it in his free hours, a few hours a week. But because of the limitations of the state, we weren't allowed to let him take that job. Now, we knew that he would be okay with this job. It was menial labor. It was safe. It was conducted in hours after school. He's a straight A student. He's involved in extracurricular activities. He's a good kid. Never been in trouble. The place was close to where he lived, so we could get him there easily back and forth. And he could have started learning the basics of real world economics at 14. But we weren't allowed to let him do that. To me, that's my choice, not the state's choice. I'm smart enough to know what my kid can and can't handle. The law says my kid has to be in school. So as long as my kid's in school, what's the problem? If he's missing school so we can go to work in the mines every day of the week, yeah, that's a problem. And if his grades are dropping because he's working too much, that's a problem. But see, I'm the parent and I have raised this child and I know what he can and can't handle. Why can't that decision be between us and the employer? I don't think that's the government's business. So I know to say, well, we have child labor laws. That sounds great. It sounds lovely. It sounds like the right thing to do. But if you actually dig into that and draw it to its logical conclusion, it prevents a lot of people from starting the process of learning about employment early. And learning about employment and how to be employed and how to pay taxes and how to act on a job is invaluable. It's one of the reasons why minority communities suffer more than white communities when it comes to employment and economics. Because in the inner city, there aren't jobs. And in the inner city, there aren't networking opportunities. So where you live in your fancy suburb, your kid goes to school with parents who own companies and businesses and who are well connected in the working industries. And they know where the jobs are and where the openings are, and you network with those people, and then that's how you find those jobs. Kids in the inner city don't have that opportunity. They don't even have the opportunity to know people who own businesses, to help them learn, to help them achieve. So to be able to start working at a younger age is to be able to start understanding how to earn your money and what to do with your money. And that is one of the most valuable skills you can have as an American citizen. And it is being denied to inner city kids. So this is a concept that really affects more than just justice. It affects who we become in the future. Again, a parent should be able to make those decisions. I'll give you another case. There was a case some years ago now in New York City at Yankee Stadium. And there's a young boy who was 12 years old, and it was his dream to be the bat boy for the New York Yankees. All he wanted his whole life to be a bat boy for the New York Yankees. Well, after a writing campaign and a little bit of publicity, he got hired as the bat boy for the New York Yankees. I mean, can you imagine 12 years old? Like, that's something that everybody dreams about, something like that in this country. Can you imagine being 12 years old, idealizing the Yankees, and then getting a job working for them? You get to be on the field every day. You get to go grab that bat. You can't buy experience like that. To be next to some of the most elite players in the world, to see how they conduct themselves, to see the value of teamwork, to earn some money while you're doing it, and to learn how adults act in employment situations. Oh my gosh. I mean, the possibilities are endless, plus all the connections he would make, everything. Well, he got this job. Well, in swoops the state of New York. Oh, sorry, we've got these child labor laws. You've got to fire the bat boy. I kid you not. They had to fire the bat boy who was living his dream outside of his school, outside the school hours. He was still going to school. He was still getting his education. The state came in and said, sorry, it's for your own good. We can't let you work here. Well, there was a huge public fuss over it, and eventually the state made an exemption for him. He got to keep his job, but the state had to make an exemption. Why can't something like that be an agreement between parents and an employer? And as long as everyone's constitutional rights are protected, and as long as everyone's getting to school and no one's being abused and no one's being mistreated, why can't that be a decision between a parent, a child, and an employer like the Yankees? We don't need government to be making these decisions for us. So again, I'm not suggesting that we allow children to work in mines at the age of 5 years old. I'm just suggesting that sometimes when the government says they're offering us help, what they're doing is limiting our opportunities and options. And bills like this AB 5 bill is one of those situations. People, I am not an enemy of the state. You are not an enemy of the state. I am an individual American citizen and a taxpayer, and all I want to do is work on my terms. The internet has been the great equalizer. It has taken the power, a lot of the power, out of the hands of huge corporate overlords who have their own biases and discrimination practices and all of that. It has taken the power out of those hands and who control their industries and put it in the hands of the individual. Look at the music industry. Look at how it's changed. Only big music companies, only big companies like Sony or Capitol Records, they had all the power. They still have a disproportionate amount of power in the industry, but you couldn't have a music career if you didn't go through them. Now, musicians from all over the world can get on. You look at Billie Eilish. This girl, my kids love her, but she just started on YouTube. She's a huge star, but she just went on YouTube, put her songs on there. You can release your own music. You can produce your own music. Given the technology that we have, you have the freedom to go make your own art and then sell your own art without having to become a slave to a corporate system. The internet has been the great equalizer, and now the government wants to tell you that you're not the right kind of it's not the right kind of equality, though. We should be able to decide what the right kind of equality is. You are not an enemy of the state because you want to control your own financial affairs. That doesn't make you an enemy. It makes you a good citizen. The government has no place here. You're not that stupid, and you deserve to make a living on your terms. And that means, yes, sometimes you do make a trade-off. It's all a transaction, right? Musicians who choose not to go into the corporate recording system, into the corporate recording industry, they're making a trade-off. They're trading off an entity that has $1 billion marketing dollars and agents and a big publicity machine. They're trading off maybe a shot at fame. They're trading off a top 10 on the Billboard charts. Everybody knows that. But what you gain is what you want. The ability to make the music you want on the terms you want. The ability to play where you see fit, if you can get in there. The ability to control your own destiny, control your own career. This is a matter of what you're allowed to do with your own destiny. It doesn't matter what side of the political fence you're on. Even if you're pro-union, pro-big union, even if you're one of those people and you just think that unions are here to protect the workers and we need to support that, even still, I think if you actually sit down and think about it, there is a good case for the government not making these decisions for you. And if you're sitting there going, well, I'm not worried about me here, I'm worried about the little guy, then what you're telling me is the little guy is too frigging stupid to make his own decisions and needs you to make them for him. That is not how I see my fellow citizens. It is not. And it is not how you should see your fellow citizens either. You are not an enemy of the state because you want to control your own financial affairs. You are a free citizen and a taxpayer. This is none of the government's business. And I have never asked for the government to come in and negotiate on my behalf. If I feel my constitutional rights are being violated, I will say something. I'll write an article. I'll hire a lawyer. I'll start a protest. I'll bitch on social media. I'll do something to protect myself. And there are many entities out there who are created to protect people like me having their civil rights violated. So I'll find one of those places. Outside of what the Constitution guarantees me as a private citizen, I've never asked the government to come in and make these decisions for me. And here in California, I don't know one person who did. I know that the unions who support Lorena Gonzalez, who is the woman who sponsored this bill, and you can go to her information page. There are a couple of different blogs that will monitor where donations come from, and you can go find one of them and you can see that almost 3/4 of her donations come from the very union that helped write this bill. You can decide for yourself if that's coincidence or not. But unions may tell us that they're working for the little guy, but it's the little guy who's getting the raw end of the deal here, and the little guy should be able to decide for themselves. And no little guy asked for this. Unions might have asked for it, but no little guy asked for it. None of us were asking for this. That's the other thing. Nobody asked for this. So not only is the government trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, they're doing it for people who never asked for it. Now, here's why you should be concerned about this bill, AB 5 here in California. There's a national version. There's a federal version of the bill sitting in Congress right now. It is called HR, this House Resolution, HR 2474, or otherwise known as the PRO Act, PRO, the PRO Act. And it is a pro-union bill, so it's aimed at strengthening the positions of unions in negotiations across the country and codifying that into national law. That's its own thing. That's its own thing. I'm not going to adjudicate the rightness of that bill. The problem is that somewhere between May and December 19th, someone pulled the bill and added an amendment to it that stuck in, basically copied and pasted the language from AB 5 to include this gig economy stuff. So this bill has already gone through committee. It's already gone through the preliminary votes. And yesterday, John Conyers sent a letter to Nancy Pelosi asking her to please bring this to the House floor for a vote so it can get passed. Estimates say it has a 34% chance at least of passing the House, which might not sound big, but that's actually pretty huge. Politically speaking, that's actually a scary number. So the bill's already there. It's waiting to go to the House for a vote. My suspicion is that they're waiting to see if they're going to win the Senate in 2020. And if they win the Senate in 2020, they'll take a vote on this and then they'll pass it on to the Senate and it'll get passed. Boom, gig economy for every state in the union gone. You should know that this bill is sitting in Congress right now and has a very good chance of passing the House. I don't know or care what your politics are, but at this moment, you should be glad that the Republicans hold the Senate because it's not going anywhere if it gets there. But it's already gone way too far in the House and way under the radar. Nobody even knew this was there. Somebody tagged, I keep on top of this stuff and I didn't even know it was there. Someone tagged me on a post on Facebook. And of course, my first reaction is skepticism because people I'm fired up about this AB 5, but I know a lot of people will look at people like me and go, well, she's being political. She's being melodramatic. People think that a lot of this stuff is just people being melodramatic. And as melodramatic as I can be, I was skeptical. So I went to read the bill for myself and holy shit, excuse my French. But it was not a lie. It's there. And I could not believe how far it had gotten. And no one said a thing. So HR 2474 sitting in the House of Congress right now. I can't even read to you the list of people who have sponsored it. Basically every Democrat in the House and then a couple of Republicans. So there's a lot of people supporting this. If you're worried about this in any way, if it makes you uncomfortable and you just don't want it coming your way, no matter what your politics are, call your representative, email your representative, tell them this bill is sitting on the House floor and ask them to vote against it should it come up. And a lot of people feel nervous about calling their reps and sending emails. You get tongue-tied, you don't know what to say, you're embarrassed. So I always suggest that if that's you, if you just feel awkward and you're not sure what to do, write yourself a little script. Do a couple of sentences and then call and be polite because the person that answers the phone and takes your messages is never your representative. I mean, usually they're just an employee. It's just a secretary. It's an assistant. It's an aide, and they're not in control of anything. They're just the messenger. So don't be rude to that person. Be nice to that person. Politely state your case. They'll ask you where you're from and if you have any contact info you'd like to share. And they'll usually say something like, we'll pass the message along, or they'll tell you what the representative thinks. Well, Representative Smith actually has supported this bill. And at least you know where the person stands. And then you could say, okay, thank you. Would you please tell Representative Smith that I don't like this bill? And it will be a consideration for me when I go to the ballot box in 2020 or whenever they're up for re-election. I encourage you to do that and to share with other people what this bill is. It's insidious. It's a bad idea, top to bottom. And any bill that takes away your choice to decide how you want to work and when you want to work is a bad idea, because you know what's good for you and your family. And there has been no greater equalizer, no greater economic engine than the internet. It has made people who previously had no way to seek financial independence. It has made it so people can do that. You can go on Etsy and sell your art items. You can go on Redbubble and sell your drawings. You can sell essential oils. You can put up a Facebook page, put up a website, sell essential oils through there. If you make handbags, you can make your handbags in your home and sell them through your personal website. I mean, there's just been no greater engine for choice and freedom than the internet. And you should be suspicious of any entity that wants to limit that for you, regardless of your politics. Take a look at this. HR 2474, the PRO Act, and also California AB 5. Government is not your master. Don't let it be. Who watches the watchers? The government says it's looking out for you. Lorena Gonzalez, the author of AB 5 here, says she's looking out for you. Governor Gavin Newsom says they're watching out for you. Well, who watches the watchers? It's got to be you people, or it won't be anyone. All right, I'm sorry if I've bored you to death with this episode. If I've hammered the point too hard, I apologize. Please don't judge every other episode by this one, but I am fired up about this, and I'm ready to go, because this is a direct violation of our constitutional rights. I can't believe it's even gotten this far in California, let alone in the House. Unbelievable. Protect yourselves, people. You're the only ones who will. The government doesn't have your best interests in mind. They don't. They're a faceless bureaucracy. They really don't care about you. It's a mistake to decide that they do. They don't know you. They don't even know who you are. They don't know where you live. They don't know what you eat for breakfast in the morning or how you conduct your affairs. They have no business there. Okay. All right. See, I'm getting sidetracked again because I just have so much to say about this. I apologize. Please come back. Please come back to JLTY. If this is your first episode and you're going, this was as boring as hell. Is this what this girl does every week? No, it's not. But this is a very important bill because it's literally squashed the California economy overnight, and everyone's kind of panicking here. So I thought I'd give a little primer on it and why it's not a good idea to support this. But I've got all kinds of other subjects that I do. Controversial and fun subjects. I'll do school choice. The gentrification last week was really fun with Giovanni. But I've done serious issues like abortion. I've covered socialism. I've covered marriage, open marriage. I think one of my favorite episodes is the one I did on open marriage and if that's a good idea. So go back and listen to those, and I think you'll be more entertained than what you heard here today. But if what you heard here today bothers you at all or causes you any concern, please share this episode so other people know. Go to my Twitter page at realkiradavis. Look at my pinned post. You can watch that explainer video and share. Information is king. Let people know what's going on and then let people make their own decisions. Until I see you guys again, well, I guess I never see you guys, but until I talk to you guys again, just remember that you can reach me online at realkiradavis on Twitter. And it's the same thing if you type in that information into Facebook. It'll take you right to my public page. Or email me at kiradavis422 at gmail.com. And email me your thoughts. And also, don't forget, every once in a while, just stop and listen to yourself. Peace.